Have you ever noticed how some people always seem to have a big plan for their future? They talk about the business they're going to start, the book they're going to write, the career they're going to pursue, or the life they're finally going to build. Every conversation sounds convincing. Their excitement feels genuine. Their confidence is contagious. For a moment, even you begin to believe that it's only a matter of time before they succeed. But months pass, sometimes even years. The conversations continue, yet the progress barely changes. Eventually, a new ambition replaces the old one, and the cycle quietly repeats itself. Most people assume this happens because motivation fades, discipline disappears, or life simply gets in the way. But what if the real reason begins much earlier? What if the moment you tell someone who you plan to become, something inside your mind changes before you've taken a single meaningful step? Today, we're going to investigate one of the most overlooked psychological traps hiding behind ambition. Welcome to the Glitch Cult, where we investigate the hidden psychology behind the decisions that quietly shape our future. Whenever people imagine a better future, one thing almost always follows. They feel an urge to tell someone about it. A student gets accepted into a university and immediately calls their parents. Someone decides to start a business and tells their closest friends. A person joins a gym and uploads their first workout. A writer shares that they're finally going to write a book. It almost feels natural, as if exciting plans are meant to be spoken out loud. But have you ever stopped to ask why? Why does simply keeping a goal to yourself often feel incomplete? Why do we feel the need for someone else to know? At first, the answer seems obvious. Maybe people simply want encouragement. Maybe they want advice, support, or accountability. And sometimes, that's exactly why they share their plans. But if that were the complete explanation, psychologists wouldn't have become interested in this behavior in the first place. Because they notice something unusual. In certain situations, the people who talked the most about their future ambitions were sometimes less likely to turn those ambitions into reality. The question wasn't whether talking was good or bad. The real question was much stranger. What exactly changes inside your mind the moment another person knows who you want to become? To answer that question, we first need to understand something that quietly shapes almost every decision we make. Every person carries an internal picture of themselves. Not a physical picture, but a psychological one. It's the answer to questions like, what kind of person am I? What am I capable of? What do I believe about myself? Over time, your mind slowly builds answers to these questions. Maybe you begin seeing yourself as disciplined because you've kept difficult promises before. Maybe you think of yourself as creative because you've spent years solving problems in unusual ways. Or maybe you believe you're someone who always gives up too easily because that's the pattern you've repeatedly experienced. This collection of beliefs becomes the lens through which you see yourself. Psychologists call it part of your identity, but in simple terms, it's the story your mind believes about who you are. Most people think this story is built only by personal experience. Work hard, and you begin believing you're hardworking. Overcome challenges, and you begin believing you're resilient. Fail repeatedly, and your confidence can slowly begin to change. That's true, but it is not the whole story. Human beings don't discover themselves in isolation. We constantly learn about ourselves through the reactions of other people. Think about how easily a single sentence can stay with you for years. A teacher once tells a child, "You're naturally gifted." Another hears, "You're not leadership material." Someone grows up constantly being called responsible. Someone else spends years being described as lazy. None of these sentences physically change a person, yet they often become part of the story people tell themselves. The reason is simple. Other people's reactions don't just describe us. They quietly influence the way we begin describing ourselves. Now imagine something slightly different. Imagine one evening, you tell your closest friends that you're starting a company. Almost immediately, the conversation begins to change. They ask what the company is going to build. They tell you it's a bold decision. Someone says they've always believed you had an entrepreneurial mindset. Another friend jokes that they'll be asking you for a job in a few years. For the rest of the evening, people aren't simply responding to an idea. They're responding to the person they now believe you're becoming. But when you return home that night, nothing has actually changed. There is no company, no product, no customers, no revenue, no months of difficult work behind you. Objectively, your life is exactly where it was before that conversation began. And yet, something important has changed. For the first time, other people have started seeing you as someone who's building a company. A future version of you has quietly entered their minds. Before you've earned that identity through consistent effort, it has already received a small amount of social recognition. Years ago, psychologist Peter Gallwitzer became fascinated by this possibility. His research suggested that when certain identity-related goals are publicly acknowledged too early, people can sometimes feel psychologically closer to becoming that person before they've actually done the work required to become them. Not because talking magically replaces action, and not because your brain gets confused between speaking and achieving. Rather, because social recognition can quietly satisfy a small part of the psychological need that persistent effort would normally fulfill. If that's true, then perhaps the biggest risk isn't that talking about your goals destroys your motivation. The danger begins when recognition arrives faster than reality. Because from that moment onwards, your mind is no longer chasing only the work. It's also trying to reconcile two different versions of you. The version that already exists in other people's minds, and the version that still has to be earned in real life. The question is, what happens when those two versions begin moving at completely different speeds? If you have made it this far, you might be wondering whether this is the moment where everything begins to fall apart. Does talking about your goals suddenly destroy your motivation? And does your brain simply stop wanting success? Not quite. Human behavior is rarely that simple. In fact, many people continue working after sharing their ambitions. They wake up early. They go to the gym. They spend hours learning new skills. They open the laptop every evening after work. From the outside, it appears as though nothing has changed. But sometimes, something much quieter has. The moment your future receives social recognition, your mind begins carrying two different versions of your life at the same time. The first is the life you're actually living. That's the one filled with uncertainty, repetitive practice, mistakes, slow progress, and days where nothing seems to happen. The second exists almost entirely inside your imagination. It's the version where the business you want succeeds. The book you want to publish gets published. You achieve your dream physique, or the company you want to build finally takes off. The problem isn't that this future exists. The problem is that validation can make that future feel psychologically closer than it really is. Then reality begins doing what reality has always done. It moves slowly. A startup isn't built in a weekend. A strong physique isn't created after a few weeks in the gym. A successful YouTube channel doesn't appear after uploading 3 videos. Most meaningful goals ask you to repeat the same ordinary actions for far longer than your emotions initially expect. And that's where many people begin experiencing something they never anticipated. The excitement that surrounded the announcement disappears, but the difficult work remains. The conversations move on. You're left alone with repetition. This is where many ambitions quietly begin to die. Not because people were incapable, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they unknowingly compared the speed of their imagination with the speed of reality. One moved immediately. The other was always going to move slowly. And no matter how talented you are, reality never accelerates simply because your expectations did. This is also why it's important to not misunderstand the purpose of saying all of this. Sharing your goals isn't automatically harmful. Sometimes it's exactly the right thing to do. Telling a coach about your training plan, working alongside a business partner, or committing to friends who genuinely hold you accountable can increase persistence rather than reduce it. The difference lies in what you're looking for. Are you sharing your goal because you need support to keep moving? Or are you sharing it because becoming recognized already feels rewarding? Those two conversations may sound identical, but psychologically, they can lead in completely different directions. Perhaps that's the real lesson hidden beneath all of this. Your future doesn't become real because people believe in it. It becomes real because your actions continue long after the excitement of talking about it has disappeared. The world may congratulate your intentions, admire your confidence, or believe you're destined to succeed. But reality never responds to intentions. It responds only to repeated action. Every chapter written, every workout completed, every difficult conversation held, every failed attempt learned from. Those quiet, ordinary moments are where identities are actually built. So if you truly want to become someone different, don't chase the feeling of already being that person. Chase the evidence. Let your work become the first proof. Let consistency become the introduction. Let reality speak before you do. Because the life you want will never be built by the conversations you have about it. It will always be built by the thousands of ordinary actions that nobody applauds while they're happening.